Mama. I'm Courtney Cecil, proud mom of two boys and an organizational culture and behavior change executive. And I'm a believer in building a movement to help the burned out, overwhelmed working moms reclaim their control and free time so that they can confidently remain in the workforce without losing the sanity or themselves. Now, let's get started. Hey, y'all. I'm your host, Courtney Cecil, and welcome back to another episode of the Life Management System. So, if you've been here before, you know the Life Management System is about building an entire ecosystem that streamlines all the moving parts of your life. And of course, we can't do that without the proper financial systems in place, because after all, like it or not, the finances are what enables so many other things in our life and the fulfillment of so many parts of our dreams. And because of that, I am so tickled to introduce Danielle Nava as my guest today. So, Danielle is a certified financial planner and the co owner of Generation Wealth. So, she and her brother and their business work with clients all over the world. Danielle, I think you said that you are in 25 different states. Is that right?
Yes, all over the US.
Okay. And Danielle,
Yeah.
tell us where you're coming from and just anything else about you that you think is important for us to know.
Yeah, of course. I currently live in Lake Charles, Louisiana, which is my hometown. And I've been a financial advisor for coming up on a decade now. And as you said, I'm a certified financial planner. So we do, uh, at Generation Wealth, we kind of pride ourselves on being comprehensive financial planning centric for every client that we have. And as you mentioned, we work with people all over the US, and actually, about half of our clientele is outside of our region in particular. But
Fantastic.
I'll go ahead and
Yeah.
add that
Yeah.
I have a special passion, and my niche personally is working with a lot of like millennial women and moms and educating women in the wealth space.
And important here, that is the magnetism that you had, Danielle. That is exactly why I was attracted to you and being able to speak with you and work with you and be able to introduce you to my audience. So thank you so much for granting me that wish. So I would love to spend most of our time together actually talking about the financial systems that women in particular need, or that it helps them to be educated about, to be able to be fluent and make more intentional decisions for themselves. So I was actually chit-chatting with my neighbor just yesterday on the way back from our gym. We work out together, and we were talking about how much it surprises us still. She's a CFA, so she's very like she spends a lot of time in finances. My husband spends a lot of time in finances. I personally can get bored by the topic, but I know it's so important. And I continue to be surprised how few people really are able to speak fluently about it, and would love
Mhm.
for you to help the listeners understand. Okay, if I am a working mom, especially, I think if I'm a single mom, it's probably
Mm.
easy to feel stuck working paycheck to paycheck, and there's no breathing room in that. It's almost like we feel like we have to work as many hours as possible in order to be able to stay financially afloat. How would
Mhm.
you recommend, given that most of this audience is already desperate for time and don't have that extra time
Mhm.
to give, how would you recommend them going about creating some breathing room in their finances without sacrificing the time they already don't have?
Exactly. Yeah. Great question. And I think to your particular question of like not having to go out and find extra income producing activities is, you can just start where you're at right now. The easiest place to start is just by taking an audit. And I don't like to use the word budgeting because I think budgeting, the idea of it is a little too traditional in a sense, and I think it's too stressful to keep up with. But I like to talk to my clients about a spending audit, and that's essentially just taking the time and investing the time up front. And always like the turn of a new year is a great time to do that. But just get really intimate with your numbers. Like you would be shocked at how many people, um, whether they're living paycheck to paycheck or even like manage to do some savings already, they don't know their numbers. The basic
Mm.
numbers everyone needs to know is like how much after tax income is coming in, how much is going out on average each month, and what is that leftover number? I like to call it money fuel. So, and you can start with when you look at your spending, if you want to make it even simpler, is just look at your ongoing expenses. Anything that's automatically being charged, of course, whether it's like utilities that you need or all of like the streaming devices that we have, everything that's ongoing is a great place to start. And my husband and I do this every year in the summer. We do a spending audit. We always find a couple $100 that we can decide that, hey, that's spending that doesn't actually align with my values or our goals, that we can eliminate or reduce. So that's a great place to start, to just kind of carve out some extra funds depending on where you're at, and kind of really go through with your partner or spouse, if you do have one, and make those decisions without altering your lifestyle too much, right? That's why I don't
Mhm.
like budgeting. It's like, we don't have time to even coupon clip. But if you take that time up front to invest, going through and knowing your numbers and finding some spaces where you can carve out some savings, that's a great place to start.
Gosh, I love that you are just acknowledging the practical reality of how hard it is for us to sit down and have a proper budget. But what we can
Hmm.
do is be super diligent and just honest with ourselves about money that might be not optimized and doesn't serve our life in the same
Hmm.
way. Maybe it's something we've outgrown. Maybe it's something we signed up for and didn't realize was an automatic reoccurring.
Yes.
Like that kind of thing is just the gross waste. And
Hmm.
Danielle, I love that you called out the importance of alignment with your values. That is truly the
Hmm.
number one thing I talk about because I feel like every decision in life, when you're really clear in what you value, you're really clear on how to expend your resources. And those resources are time and money and energy. So if it's not something that serves you, then why are we keeping it around? Why is that baggage continuing to come with us?
Exactly. And the audit allows you to do like kind of more, instead of just evaluating one charge and thinking, oh, well, yeah, I need that. It allows you to kind of naturally compare it side by side, apples to apples
Mhm.
with other things. And then, yeah, you get to pick what's more important. Maybe I don't have to have both of these two things, even though they're similar. Maybe you can pick one and eliminate the other.
Yeah,
And
I like
I
that.
like how yeah, and I like how you said optimize. Optimizing what you already have is essentially what this is.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and again, making sure that everything that you are expending um, energy and money on is something that it's actually giving you're getting a return on that, as opposed to just giving money away to other people that that we don't really have to offer.
Yeah. And to your point, like the big component with aligning your spending with your values is also doing the work on writing out your goals and your dreams.
Mm.
Because when you get clear on what it is that you ultimately want, again, you get to kind of compare side by side, like, well, is this Hulu subscription or this you know, something you signed up for and aren't really using, is this more important, or the fact that I want to be hiring a cleaning lady in a year,
Hmm.
just as an example, or I want to be taking 2 vacations a year with my family? You can weigh those side by side very easily.
Oh my goodness. So I can't tell you how much you are making my heart sing right now, Danielle, because that is something that I talk about often. So I am confident that for about $100 a month in most cities, most towns, you can get a lot of the low-hanging, joy-sucking stuff off your plate. And I'm
Mhm.
a huge believer in that. It's something that I help women everywhere figure out how to do. And not to make like I don't want to make light of $100. $100 is not chump change. It is material money, more so for other people, some people than others. But the difference is I believe most people in dual income families do have $100 to spend. It's a matter of what you desire to spend it on. So and that is exactly the cards that I put in front of people. Do you prefer to spend it on the fast food? or do you prefer to spend it on your time? Do you prefer to spend it on, to your example, Hulu, or do you prefer to spend it on your time? It just goes back to you
Mm-hmm.
prioritizing what it is that you value. And there's no right or wrong answer. It is your life. You totally get to make the decision that serves you and your family the best. But it's critical to understand that where you place your money is a byproduct of what you value, or it should be if you're using it intentionally. And that same money, to your point, can be used on material items if that's what you value. It can be used on time if that's what you value, or experiences. I love the vacation thing. Like I
Mm-hmm.
think getting really honest, and I just love that you called out the importance of that because it matters.
It does. Or you could spend that $100 on investing and investing in your future self.
Oh, so let's talk about that because I would love to unpack a lot of the major financial related decisions that you believe people need to consider to have better control of their finances and reduce some of their financial stress. So talk more about both investing and anything else you believe is important for them to consider in those critical financial decisions.
Yeah, and coming from the perspective of imagining that there's a mom who hasn't started investing on her own yet, is living paycheck to paycheck, um, assuming that emergency funds aren't optimized, I always talk to my clients first about financial foundations.
Mhm.
And I did mention investing, and that is the ultimate goal, but not everyone is ready for investing. So I can't um, underestimate the value of prioritizing two things. That is getting your high interest debt under control or eliminated, um, and getting your cash to an optimal level. So when it comes to the debt, I day in and day out, I have women coming to me who are stressed out by their debt. But when I pop the hood and look under, a lot of times most of the debt is low interest. And I consider low interest debt anything with an interest rate below 7%. These are your student loans, these are
Mhm.
mortgages, these are auto loans. And I immediately kind of alleviate some of their stress by saying, we are not prioritizing that low interest debt. You're going
Mm.
to pay it according to the note, and you're not going to put any additional funds to it. The reason being is that interest rate being low means that it's really cheap for you to borrow that money. So it's better for you to leverage any additional savings you may have. Now, if it's high interest debt, you do want to prioritize that and get that down, like your credit card debt, especially if you have a tendency to kind of like stick your head in the sand with it, or
Mhm.
just you're always keeping a balance on that, you want to really work towards getting that paid off, if the interest rate is like 8% or higher. And then you need to work on, and you can work on these two things simultaneously, but an optimal level of cash. So the rule of thumb for emergency funds is 3 to 6 months of your living expenses. Again, we go back to knowing your numbers. So if you do the work up front of getting to know your numbers, the rest of your financial plan is going to become easier. And so you can just take that monthly expenditure, multiply it by 3 if you are single, like a single without any dependents. If you have children or dependents, that goes up to 5 or 6 months. If you're just married without kids, you're good in like the 4 to 5 month range. But having a suitable amount of cash can really solve a lot of problems, alleviate stress, and allow you to take control back.
I also appreciate that you're calling out the rainy day fund that we need. The access to liquidity is different based on our life circumstances and whether or not we're rolling independent or married or with kids. And I think that's just a really
Mhm.
important point that is not talked about as probably as frequently as it should be. Uh,
Yeah, and the reason why you shouldn't be investing is because the last thing you want to happen with your investments is that when an emergency does happen, because they will happen, the last thing you want to do is be forced to go into more credit card debt to
mhm.
access those funds, or interrupt your investments. So you never want to have to interrupt your investments and take them out when they're not planned for. So that's why, again, that cash amount is so important to have that buffer there.
Thank you for that, Danielle. I think that's just such a solid piece of wisdom. And I'd also just like to acknowledge and brag on your behalf quickly that there's a big difference, as Danielle and I were talking about before this call, between just a financial coach, because coaching is a very generic term, doesn't necessarily require a certification, and Danielle's level of accreditation, which is the creme de la creme. So Danielle, audience and friends, really does know what she's talking about. So thank you for that wisdom. Okay, then pulling on that thread of minimizing financial related stress, what type of routines and automations and that sort of thing can or should people be thinking about to save some of that time and mental energy expenditure?
Yeah, the great news about like your money and your finances is almost everything can be automated. And to me, like automation is the key to unlock the alleviating of all of this stress. So automate, automate, automate everything you can. Know your numbers on where to start, and then you can come up a plan to automate it. So even if it's just for example, like if you have high interest debt, you can go into a plan on how to prioritize what to pay off first. So ideally, you want to look at like your interest rates and you want to tackle the debt with the highest interest rates first. And you come up with a plan for that. There's also things you can do if you have credit card debt of like a balance transfer that can give you a little time and space with the 0% interest to pay it down. As long as you're taking that opportunity and planning out, like, okay, I owe $5,000 by April, for example, then you need to be paying $1,000 a month so that it's paid down by the time that offer ends. Then with your cash, you need to set a goal, and then you can say, okay, I have $500 in money fuel left over each month. So I'm going to set up a $500 a month automatic transfer from my main checking account to my high yield savings account until I reach that minimum 3 months of living expenses. You set it and it's operating in the background. The same goes for your investments. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But I think automating everything, finding a tool to help you figure out the income and expenses would be helpful too.
Yeah, all I hear when you're talking right now is the chronic fights I used to have with my husband, who's in charge of our finances. He is a finance pro through and through, and it's a huge thing he geeks out on. But the problem is he has terrible organization. And he used to say, like, because he's in charge of the finances and like really being the administrator of our plans and our investments and whatever else, he also is naturally responsible for the bills. That is the one thing I offload to him. And honest to goodness, Danielle, he used to want to do that manually, wanted to bill pay manually. And
Mm,
I know the amount of late payments we had
mm.
because Homeboy would not like set up that automation was just mind numbing. And eventually I said, you know what? I am going to do this. This has to happen. I understand your ambition related to wanting to go in and manually process and like, spend time thinking through the transactions, but you can do that any day of the year. But paying the bills has to happen at a certain time. This is an absolute no-brainer that you set up at a minimum, even the most basic automation, let alone the next level stuff like you're talking about.
Exactly. If there is something that doesn't allow me to auto pay on a monthly basis, I will incur penalties for late fees. Like, and I think any mom would, right? We have
Yeah.
10 other things that we're trying to juggle. The last thing we need is 20 different bills coming due and us trying to manually pay those.
Well, to that same point, it makes me think of some of these automatic subscriptions. So things like my
Mm,
Pura diffusers, or I get a lot of my organic meat from Butcher Butcher Box. There we go. Normally, I'm really good at at making monitoring them and making sure that I reset that subscription if I'm not ready for the things. But every now and then it'll get me, and I'm like, oh, great. Now I right now, actually, currently, I probably have 30 different filet mignons in my freezer. I don't need that. I need like the six we get every other month.
Mm-hmm.
But like to your point, as much as I like to think I can stay on top of it, it's just not the priority when life happens. So you've got to make it as
No.
simple on yourself as possible.
Yep.
Um,
I know there's always like a like just recently I have cats and we order those like little they're like little tube snacks. It's like wet food in a little
mhm.
plastic tube. And I set up like a automated delivery where you save a little bit of money. And I was like, this new package we got that we didn't need just offset any of the savings that I would have gotten.
Yes,
Like
yes, that had like
I'm
all the
like,
time.
I'm turning all of these off. Like I
Yes.
went through and I was like, oh, this is the tab that shows everything I'm subscribed for. I was like, cancel, cancel, cancel.
Yes, but it goes back to where you started, which is around an
Hmm.
audit of what you've already
Hmm.
committed to and what no longer really needs to be present in your life. So, part of the reason we sign up for all these subscriptions, sometimes it's because we get a little bit of a discount. Sometimes it's just because it's the freaking easiest thing to do. So, pulling on
Hmm.
that thread and like pushing the easy button, doing whatever it is that we need to do for ourselves to invest in ourselves, that is something that moms inherently don't do well in. We carry a lot of guilt. Moms in particular are very slow to invest in themselves. I mean, you'll all the memes on the internet around like mom's wearing a bra that she's had for the past 30 years.
Yes.
But like the kid, the kids are wearing the shiny stuff
The
shiny.
underwear. Yeah.
Yes. Like it's so
So
true.
true.
So
And
knowing
like
that you go
even
ahead.
when we get time where you're like, oh, you have an hour, 2 hours just to relax, like you feel guilty about relaxing. Like how
Yes.
is
Yes, just
yes.
yesterday I was having a conversation with a client where I'm saying, okay, I need you to remove yourself from this. Actually, I was talking about it today on my Instagram too. I need you to remove yourself from the situation because you're having such a hard time unwinding and you're naturally tightly spun, and the way to unwind is to not have your to-do list in front of you right now until you create the muscle and the mental fortitude to be confident and just letting it all go and to be at peace with letting it all go. You need to go on a run or a walk or go out to drinks with a
Hmm.
girlfriend or just something to remove
Yes.
yourself from it, because to your
Hmm.
point, yeah, we do a really shoddy job investing in ourselves, both from a time perspective and a money perspective. So, what advice might you have to the moms you work with around managing the guilt of spending on themselves and encouraging them to prioritize their own needs without shame?
Yeah, I mean, the moms are the backbone of the family. It's not just the physical things we do for everyone, which is substantial. It's also the mental load that we take on, and it's making sure everything is done from the way that they like their oatmeal in the morning for breakfast to
Mhm.
making sure the groceries are ordered and errands are taken care of, like everything, buying the gifts that everyone needs in the house. And so I think we need to like it's okay to have the guilt, but you also need to be working towards this sort of like confidence of like, yeah, I'm a badass and I have huge value and I deserve this, right? I deserve to treat myself because I can't pour from an empty cup. We all know when we are depleted and we are down and we're carrying stress and guilt and this overload of things, like we're not as good as moms as we can be. We start to drag in our work and careers. We're not, then we feel like we're not doing enough in our relationships. So you have to give yourself this break. And I think those who feel guilty, those are the people who inherently are not going to go overboard for it. But you
Right.
need to, if you need to have that discussion, kind of a hard discussion with your partner or your spouse about what you need to fill your cup, we all should be booking those girl trips, going on dinner with friends and movies and treating ourselves with whatever it is that that we enjoy, whether it's a new pair of running shoes or like beauty products that we want. Like you've got to make sure you're rewarding for yourself for the badass that you are. And I feel like 2025 is that year for women where we confidently set our boundaries, believe in ourselves, like take ownership of our value, say things with our whole chest, and kind of just demand to be valued. So that is a
Mhm.
practice. It's always easier said than done, but whatever it is you need to get there, whether it's watching like a documentary about like women's strength or following accounts like female quotient, whatever it is that gives you that confidence in that, I suggest you look into those things and really just start giving yourself more grace and just go, like I said, you deserve to buy and treat yourself for the value that you provide.
Yeah, I always tell women it's about, being able to walk with your shoulders back, essentially, like that
Yeah.
swagger. But
Yes.
so, moms are inherently incredibly selfless humans.
Hmm.
And but what I keep reminding my clients and all of my listeners is you have one life to live. And everybody else does a damn good job doing that. Why don't we deserve to do the same thing? But the other thing too is when I talk about outsourcing some of your low joy tasks, then it goes back to where we started, Danielle, around priorities. Like I think most of us, thankfully, are in a position to be able to afford to do both, be able to buy the new running shoes and be able to invest in giving ourselves the time. But everything goes back to being clear on your values, because based if
Hmm.
you're clear on what you value, you know what to prioritize. If you know what to prioritize, you know how to expend your resources. So
Exactly.
um, I love that, and a priority for me is travel. I love that, and I know that's why I work. I work my ass off to be able to go see all these fun places and experience the world. And I think that knowing what you value allows you to make
Hmm.
really easy decisions on where you put all the things.
Absolutely. I would agree with travel, both for like I do all of that. I take trips with my girlfriends. I take one-on-one trips with my husband, and then making sure we go on one or two family vacations a year. Those are
Mhm.
top priorities for us because
Yeah.
those are experiences, those are memories,
Mhm.
and yeah,
Yeah, I have a
money,
lot of people that give me a
money.
hard time. They're like, I can't, like, you book so far out. And I'm like, I kind of do, but I only book far out because, to your point, I prioritize those vacations. So I plan
Mhm.
those first. I get my PTO in order. I get those vacations booked and laid out in the calendar,
Mhm.
and everything else has to fit in around those.
Yeah, and it's the same with saving. If you want your future self, if all of us have this idea of like who we're going to be in 5, 10, 15, 30 years, what our retirement's going to look like. And it's hard to balance that with living in the present and having to this idea of having to sacrifice a little bit in the now for the future.
Hmm.
Um, but I think like I know for me, the older I get, the more wisdom I have around aging, like knowing how fast everything comes. Maybe it's just because it's what I do too. I'm like,
Yeah.
I love planning and mapping out lives, and it's like, oh, you wanna retire early, like at 50? Hell yes! Like let's make that happen, and let's look at depending on where you're at, where we can make that happen. And I always tell them you have to prioritize saving. You save first and spend second. And whatever is truly important to you, you will make that a priority and make the plans early like you do with the travel. Make sure the money fuel is going towards specific goals that you've set out.
Yeah, so ironic to this conversation, I just got back from Aruba celebrating my 40th and I went with a
Happy
girlfriend.
birthday.
Thank you. I wanted to be able to to go somewhere new. I'd never been there before. It was a new country for me. My goal is 50 countries before I turn 50. So that
Oh,
was
I love
another
that.
like notch in my belt there. But given that I just turned 40, Danielle, I would love to hear from you. What do I need to be considering to secure my future? I'm okay not retiring at 50 because I recognize it's probably my trade-off with wanting to travel. But so
Mhm.
that aside, like what would your recommendations to me be?
Yeah, and I want to, before I even give some recommendations, I want to acknowledge the fact that I've never met a woman who didn't feel like she was behind based on like her
Gosh, that's
age and
so
where she's at.
good.
Yeah.
That's so good. I mean, probably part of how women are wired, moms specifically are wired. But what a freeing comment, because I
Mm.
100% feel that all the time. All the time. I'm constantly thinking like
Women
we live
feel,
in a
yeah,
place of mentality like there's never enough time, where there's never enough money, there's never enough. It's just
mhm,
not in a place of abundance. Wow, what a
yeah.
gift.
And then that attitude of like, well, I'm too late, like, and then we to sort of to justify like our spending habits, for example, in the present, because it's so stressful, and we're like, well, I just need to go get that takeout. I just need to go on vacation. All of that adds to the fact of that narrative of that it's too late. I might as well not start. Like it just is a cycle. It feeds itself. So again, I go back to you need to write out like what your actual goals are, write them down somewhere, whether it's like in an app or on your phone. Um, and like to your point, getting clear on those goals because um, if you're 40 right now and let's say you want to retire at 60, which is
Mhm.
still considered a little early by American
Mhm.
standards, that's 2 decades, 20 years
No,
where
it also
the
tells me
actions,
how much longer I have to work.
right?
Ah,
Right. But you have 20 years of disciplined small actions put in place that are going to compound over 2 decades. So I feel, I want to say to anyone who is approaching 40 or just after the 40 mark, early 40s, you still have plenty of time. But yeah, so my top recommendations are have a bank account or an investment account in your name only. A lot of us have
oh,
this through like our 401ks or like if you have like a retirement account through work. But I would encourage you to make sure you have at least a bank account or an investment account in addition to that retirement account in your own name. Um, that way, there's a bunch of different reasons for that, but it's important to for credit reasons, and having your own account allows you to make investment decisions that are different from your spouse or partner, or
mm,
if anything were to happen, let's say y'all needed to separate or divorce, having access to your own to money that the partner can't freely access is really important.
oh
So
yeah.
that's my first step. Um, even if you are, um, do you have a lot of moms that are like stay-at-home moms, or are they mostly working,
Mostly
as they
working,
say?
but I do have a good
Yeah.
many that are either stay-at-home moms or have more of the side hustle type nature where they're stay-at-home
Hmm.
moms, but they're starting to slowly dabble in side income.
Yeah. And I say for the women who are are working inside the home or starting to part-time, it's really important to get a spousal IRA. If the majority of your household income is coming from your partner, you still need to get a retirement account in your own name, and that is possible. Um, okay, so the next one is obviously your credit score is really important for future purchases. Being 40, you're in basically a hurricane of life events. You've
Mhm.
probably already gone through some, but like age 40 to 50, you're still going to have a lot of things coming at you that are going to require you to make um, important decisions or also likely as opportunities. So you want to make sure that credit score is nice and healthy and high so you can get the best interest rates when you go to get loans for things. And then going back to the cash, you really want to make sure you have a suitable amount in cash savings or equivalent. So that's cash in your home. Don't recommend that. Cash in your checking, savings, CDs, or a high yield savings account. And then lastly, two more things. Investing. So if you have not really focused or prioritize investing and you have your foundations in place, you need to start as soon as possible. There's a bunch of different accounts you can start with. But the last thing that a lot of people don't think about that is very important is kind of the protection side of things, of making sure you have a appropriate amount of term life insurance and your
Mm,
estate planning documents, especially if you have children or dependents. The estate planning documents are very important because in those documents you're naming who's going to watch your kids if you and your partner were to pass at the same time. In addition to, if you do have a good amount of wealth and you have underage children, you might need to get a trust made. So those are some things that, like, those are the basics that I would say at 40, setting yourself up for success. Um, moving into a space where you're trying to work towards retirement. Those are the most important things.
yeah, I'm so glad you called out the importance of estate planning. I'm still surprised how many people do not have it in place. And I unfortunately already have parents that have been widowed, and it that
Mhm.
also makes it complex when you haven't really taken time to lay out your affairs because money gets tied up. Things just get tied up that are out of your control while you need to let the chips settle, and estate planning solves for that preemptively. So, Danielle, I
Yes.
want to go back to the trust thing because I know that my husband and I were quite surprised how low your income really needs to be in order to have a trust. To us, that word we associated with multiple, many million dollar families, and it's not that. Can you
Mm-mm.
elaborate just a little bit on what a trust does and the level of income where people should start considering it?
Yeah, to your point, the income, I would say the income is um, not arbitrary, but I think if you're in a dual family income household, um, and you have underage children, and you are actively planning to grow your wealth over time, like you're investing, um, which means basically the trust is to plan for if both of you die. You
Mm-hmm.
know, obviously, like you're going to have each other as your primary beneficiaries, like if something random happens to either the mom or the dad. But in cases where you both happen to predecease your child when they're underage, you're basically saying, because you legally can't name a contingent beneficiary that's underage.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when you would name the trust itself. And in the trust, you name like the executor, who's who do you trust that's going to be making those decisions? But you get to make a lot of those decisions in advance, and the executor just makes sure everything
They're
that you
executed.
want to happen is executed.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can decide when they would want to come into when your children could come into control over that. So like a lot of people don't want their children to get access to this giant nest egg like at 18 or at
Mm-hmm.
21 or even 30, right? So you get to make that decision on how the funds are distributed. For example, maybe they can get an income like from the dividends and stuff of those investments, but they don't get full control of all of that money.
Mm-hmm.
So you essentially get to make the rules for your children on what you think is best.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to educate on that point because I think it's one that is often overlooked. And I'm so glad you added that to the list. It is for us, I know my husband and I felt really guilty that our youngest was probably 1.5 when we finally prioritized doing it because something like estate planning is one of those things that you know is really important but not urgent. So we tend to kick it off. And there is inherent risk with kicking it off. So thank you so much for calling that out. Okay,
And
Danielle, I want to go ahead. Yeah.
I'll go ahead and add a little recommendation. You can go on LegalZoom, or there's a company called Trust and Will, where they can specialize in getting kind of like your basic estate planning documents done. They kind of team you up with an attorney that's in your state to get that done.
Oh,
Because a lot of
okay.
times when you go to hire an estate planning attorney based on where you live, it can get very, very expensive. So that's kind of just a cost efficient way to go about it.
Oh, Thank you for that. Thank you. Okay, I would love to move on to a couple lightning round questions that I ask every guest that I have on. The first is, what is your go-to stress busting activity?
Okay, so I love to, I'm a baker. I do enjoy cooking, but my favorite is like when there's no one in the house or they're like sleeping. I love to kind of clear up the kitchen, turn on a really good podcast, and put the AirPods in and just kind of bake and do my thing, dance around the kitchen. I also, I love a good streaming situation or a
Hmm.
good movie that allows me to just like shut my brain off for a little bit and just kind of get lost in the movie or the show. Um, and then yeah, that's kind of like what I have time for right now
Yeah,
for
I get
stress
it. I mean,
busting.
meeting you where you are. So, well, speaking of movies or podcasts or books, what's the one that you've watched or consumed lately that you've really crushed on?
I'm a longtime fan of My Favorite Murder. I'm a true crime
Oh,
junkie.
okay, yeah.
So when I have time to turn on a podcast and I just kind of want to enjoy myself, I turn on the latest like long episode of My Favorite Murder. And then I recently have enjoyed I've started it but haven't fully gotten through it, but Braving the Wilderness by Brene Brown
Oh,
is
yeah.
incredible.
I am going to the Mom 2.0 conference in Orlando this year, and they just announced that Brene is keynoting there.
Oof.
So
Oh
pumped to be able to see
wow.
her live.
Wow.
I know, right? Yeah.
That's
So if you're
awesome.
interested in joining, Danielle, I will see you at the beginning of April in Orlando, and we will be listening to Brene together live.
Love it. Send me a link.
Um, okay, so last question. If you could wave a magic wand, what task would you eliminate forever and
This
ever and
one's
ever?
easy. Laundry.
Oh,
I hate
really?
laundry. Yeah, I hate it.
Danielle,
I
don't
hate it.
do it.
I
Don't do it.
can,
Get rid of it.
so we recently I haven't. So like I'm really good. Like I don't mind like putting the clothes in the washer and moving them to the dryer.
Mhm.
It's the folding,
Mhm.
the ironing, and the putting away. It just like, I have a mental block. Like I it doesn't get done. It doesn't get done
Yeah.
for like maybe once a month. So before we recently had all of my in-laws are in town living with us right now. And so one of the older sisters enjoys doing laundry. So she's doing that for us now. But before they arrived, we did hire like our girl's main babysitter nanny. She started coming in just to do the laundry. And I swear it was the best money I've ever spent.
Yeah.
Like having it all folded and put away into the correct drawers, like it just
Yeah.
brought a joy that I just can't explain. It was amazing. So
Well,
yeah,
that's
I don't think
exactly
I
what
can
I'm
go
talking
back.
about. Like, get rid of the low joy items for $100 a
Yes,
week. You get to get
yes,
rid of that kind of crap. And it's amazing. There's no
exactly.
reason that you have to do something you hate that much. I hear
Never
you.
going back.
Yeah, well, I nor will I for that matter. It is, I would say my answer to this was my getting ready routine. I've got a lot of hair.
Mm,
I've a
mm.
lot of all the skin routine, like skin things I do. I hate that, but I think if it was like chore related, it'd also probably be laundry. Last question for you, Danielle. Where can people find you?
So I am an Instagram girly. That's like my platform of choice. So at Danielle underscore Nava underscore. And then I also am on LinkedIn and threads, whatever. But
Mhm.
Instagram is mainly where I hang out. So come give me a follow, shoot me a DM. I'm happy to connect with any of your followers.
Perfect. Thank you. And I actually, but right before we started, added you to LinkedIn as well. So,
Perfect.
okay, friends. Well, thank you again for being here. One of the reasons that I thought this was so important, this conversation with Danielle, is because now that we are about to kick off a new year, we start to really be intentional about setting healthy habits. The first January through March, that first 3 month time period, is the perfect time of year to really incubate and focus on us. So I hope that you are able to do that for yourself, that you are able to put practices in place like the audit that Danielle talked about of your finances, to be able to start prioritizing you and create that financial system that works for you. If you're interested, though, in learning about other healthy habits that I have put in place for myself to get to where I am right now. And we're talking things that will take 3 minutes a day to do that will make an immense difference over time. You can get access to that at www.workingmomsmovement.com/healthy-habits. I'm going to put that in the show notes. I'm going to link Danielle's bio in the show notes. So check it all out there. Thanks again for joining. Subscribe, rate and review us, share it with a friend. It honestly makes all the difference for small businesses to get off the ground. But until next time, friends, if nobody's told you lately, you're doing a great job. You've got this, Mama.